Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's your guy, Seth Garu Baxter with Maker's Bar on my show, and we are more than happy to have you here where we are creating 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. Today, our special guest is Dr. Fred Moss. Fred Moss is a mental health advocate and psychiatrist serving in many capacities, a keynote speaker, a psychiatric expert with witness, podcaster, mental health coach, and teacher, with a strong desire to help people to be real and heard by the driving force, leading him to multiple settings as a psychiatrist over the years and compelling him to continually look better, more effective ways to provide the highest quality care to align people with their most authentic self and to deliver an eagerly awaiting world. He is the amazing creator of Welcome to Humanity, which is one of the things that first got me interested. And sorry for looking away, but I wanted to make sure I had that correct because everyone deserves their intro. Welcome to Humanity has been one of the things that brought him to my attention. So we're going to talk about a couple of different subjects, as well as his psychiatry. He's also a financial advisor, and we're going to delve a little into his podcast as well. Dr. Fred Moss, thank you so much for joining me today on Maker's Bar.
Seth, it's so great to be here. I can't wait for this conversation. It was nice to meet you, and let's get this thing going. And I'm looking forward to what's going to unfold here.
Sounds good. Doctor, tell us about your origin story, where you were born and how you were raised and what led you down this path of psychiatry.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I was a born healer for sure. The first second I came out, I was already being called on to bring joy and unity to a family in chaos and disarray. I had two brothers. They were 10 and 14 years older than me. So they were already kind of, defiant little teenagers. And my parents were having a fair amount of difficulty with them, as I was told. And my job was to arrive and bring joy. And that's exactly what I did for a couple of years and really learned the essence of communication at such a young age, probably before I even knew how to speak. The idea was that I could make an impact in a room. I could actually listen or be heard. And I could, by smiling or by making fun or by playing or by showing how smart I was or how cute I was, I could make a big difference. And even when I was a pain in the neck, I could make a big difference. So I learned early on that communication was the essence of, what healing is about and what humanity is about. I vividly remember watching my brothers and parents talk while I was in the playpen, hoping that someday I would be able to do that too. Talk to each other, make stuff happen, talk to each other, listen to each other, make stuff happen. And I was just enchanted with the whole idea of communication. My thoughts was that I knew school was coming around the corner and it's that must be where people learned how to communicate. But when I eventually entered school, elementary school, I realized that wasn't what school was about at all. There wasn't an open discourse to encourage. In fact, I was told very frequently to just sit down, be quiet, and do what the teacher says. And I was already pretty precocious. I knew how to speak. I knew a little bit about reading. I knew a little bit about math. I knew a little bit about world affairs. After all, I had 4 adults in the home, or 4 seeming adults in the home. And it was hard. Yeah, seeming adults. It was hard for me to stay quiet. And so there's no elementary school teacher who ever forgot having Fred as a student. Pretty sure about that. And when we moved forward, it didn't work out in elementary school. I was like, where am I supposed to learn how to speak? So I started spending a lot of time outside of school, just adventures, taking ventures over there and learning what's going on past that road and learning what's going on in that city, taking my bike past 9 Mile, maybe even past 8 Mile, and really get over there and learn that was where communication was happening in the non-school area. But I went into, higher education, you should say, like junior high and high school, hoping for the same, but only being discouraged again. So eventually I gave college a try. I figured, well, if it didn't happen there, let's just see if college will teach me how to communicate. And I loved their helmets, and they were only 40 miles away, and I was kind of bred to be a Wolverine. So off I went to the University of Michigan, and I was there for about 1.5 years, a little bit longer. I loved Ann Arbor, but school itself sucked again. And I was like, I'm not going to do this, man. I was in engineering school, and I was out of here. And so I got on a bus from Ann Arbor, actually from Detroit. And I took a bus to Berkeley, California with all my stuff with the hopes of learning what my life was about. And I had a great summer in Berkeley after dropping out of college, but it wasn't sustainable. And the idea was, my family thought there was this new field and I had the aptitude to carry it out. The field was, you might have heard of it. It was called computers. And the idea was the first computer in Michigan was at the University of Michigan. So back I went all the way to Ann Arbor so that I could work on this 2-acre computer. It was like a big thing, with punch cards and batch jobs. And I didn't like that job either. I didn't see a future in that. I'm in space, stay up all night in the computer building. And that didn't seem like something that would actually satisfy my itch either. So I dropped out a second time and I swore that I would never go back to school again. So my mom's cool with that, but she said, you got to get a job, moms will be like that. So she got me an application for a couple applications, but one application was for a childcare worker at a state mental hospital for adolescent boys. And I was like, okay, I can do that for like 3 weeks. That's how long orientation goes. And I'll take my paycheck, buy myself a car and start driving around the country to figure out what my life was about. But that isn't really what happened. On the 4th week, I was convinced to try going up to the floors by my friend Paul, who later became a very close friend. And back to the floors I went. And in the first day, that first Monday, the 4th week, I learned, I was able to see that communication really was the gem that I thought it was. The idea of communicating with these kids, not like they were kids and not like they were mental patients, but like they were just fellow humans trying to figure shit out as we were going through the world. That's all that was happening. And if I could connect with them, then healing took place. And it would take place instantaneously. It didn't need any 3 weeks. It didn't need authorization. It didn't need a doctor's order. It was just a matter of being with these kids. And so communication really is so beautiful. And I saw I loved the job for the most part. The thing I didn't like was the route that psychiatry was taking. We had psychiatrists there and they weren't, we would call them if Jimmy and Johnny had a fight or something, and they'd come down and talk to Jimmy and Johnny for like 5 seconds and then talk to me for like 7 seconds and then go in a nursing station and write some order. And then we'd go have to retrieve Jimmy or Johnny in a quiet room and hold them down while we jammed them full of some injectable sedative cocktail. And it would put them in a stupor. And by the way, this is still happening everywhere all the time in every hospital all over America. That's not, people think, oh, that's weird or that's too bad. Well, we're just blind to it, but it's happening all day long in all the hospitals. Not everybody is getting injected, but this idea of chemically restraining or physically restraining patients is so rampant and it's not slowed down at all. But I knew that communication.
If you don't mind, I'd like us to circle back to that later on too.
Yeah,
I want that point. That's a very important point. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I decided that communication needed to win. And I was going to represent communication, go back to school, get myself my degree, and then apply to medical school and become a doctor, and then become a psychiatrist, and then become a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and become a child and adolescent psychiatrist who communicated. And lo and behold, 9 years later, all of that was done. And I was done with, Northwestern University. I was now a doctor. I was now a psychiatrist. I was now a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and I was spat out into the world again. Well, psychiatry had done whatever psychiatry had done in that meantime. Prozac had been introduced in 1987. That totally changed the world. It put the world upside down. No one really remembers how impactful Prozac was. So Prozac made it be like, had us all believe all of a sudden that if we were having trouble, it was on us. If we were having difficulty, if we were sad, if we were anxious, if we were afraid, if we were distracted, if we were awkward, if we were hopeless, if we were helpless, if we were nervous, any of those things, that was because there was something wrong with us. Well, of course, that's not the case at all. This is a hard world to live in. And there's at least, there's hundreds of reasons to not feel very well every so often, or even regularly. I mean, after all, and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the person. So I worked hard, after I graduated to try to figure out how to stay a communicator, because psychiatry had now become typecast as being some profession that diagnosed people with what was wrong with them and then gave them medication. And I was like, I wasn't down with either of those things. That isn't what I bought into. But sure enough, over the next, 20, 30, 35 years, that's what I did. And I did a lot of it. I did a lot of, it was against my better judgment in some cases. It was duplicitous in some ways. I didn't like telling people what was wrong with them because who am I? Who am I to tell you what's wrong? You're just a human bumbling and stumbling through the world just like me. And there's nothing wrong with you. I don't really see that that's the case until I give you medicine. Then now there'll be something wrong with you, or until I diagnose you, now there'll be something wrong with you. Because you'll take on that identity, and those medicines obviously do cause chemical imbalances, which we thought existed before. But after we start the medicine, we finally get the chemical imbalance that contributing to the condition that it's being marketed to treat. So when we finally got that and we finally walked on through, it was like, okay, I did this for like 15 years. And then it was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to do something different because I'm tired of soul sacrifice and, big old headaches and, heart, heartbreak basically. And so I decided that
really quick, the heartbreak was what? What was the
heartbreak? Was because I knew that what I was doing wasn't very good for the people I was treating. See, I had made an oath, but even long before the Hippocratic Oath, the idea was I don't like hurting people. And I wasn't sure that diagnosing and medicating people wasn't hurting them. In fact, I was pretty sure that it was hurting them. And that was where the heartbreak came in, the soul sacrifice and the broken heart. And so in 2006, I began to do something that most people thought was pretty radical. To me, it seems like pretty normal. And that was to just start taking people off of their medicine with their agreement. Find some people. I had 2,000 people in my practice at the time. And I started taking several hundred of them off of their medicine. Lo and behold, they all got better, reliably, predictably, profoundly better. Of course they did, because these medicines don't work to make you well. They work to make you worse. So when I removed these medicines, people got better and in most cases lost their diagnosis altogether, no longer showed any symptoms of the diagnosis. Because in fact, the medicines perpetuate, increase, or actually cause the symptoms they're marketed to treat. And that's what I got to realize at that point when I started taking people off of medicine. They got way better than they ever remember themselves being. So it was like, how am I going to get this point across to the world? Because it's so important. I wanted to scream it from the mountaintops, but, that doesn't get stuff done. And I wanted to get violent about it, just tell mothers to stop medicating their children and tell doctors to stop giving families or people medicines because they're damaging. But I didn't do that because that doesn't get the point across. So I learned instead how to be a little bit smoother about it, how to look for where can I address this that makes some sense. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized it wasn't the medicine at all. It really wasn't the diagnosis at all. It even wasn't the doctors. It wasn't the insurance company. It's not big pharma. It's not the medical system. It's not any of that. What it is that we think there's something wrong with us. That's the problem. We think there's something wrong with being uncomfortable. We think that means that we're sick, but it isn't. Being uncomfortable in this world does not mean that you're ill at all. If you're not uncomfortable in this world, that might mean that you're ill, actually. There are so many reasons to be uncomfortable, including the fact that misery is inherent in the human condition. I mean, just ask Buddha that. If you look at Buddha, he sat under his tree for a while. He worked everything out except for one thing. And that one thing was that misery is part of the human condition. So misery is to be expected in this lifetime, and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. That's only a trigger that gets tripped that allows you to then go to get the professional help, which gives you then the condition that you thought you might have had. So people don't come to a psychiatrist to find out if there's something wrong with them. They actually come to a psychiatrist to find out what's wrong with them because they've already determined that something's wrong with them. So they're in behind the eight ball already, and once we give them a reason to call themselves defective, deficient, ill, afflicted, affected, whatever. Once we give them an alphabet soup worth of a diagnosis, now they walk away knowing that they're ill. They're like, I got it, man. I read the criteria. I'm bipolar, or I'm PTSD, or I'm on the spectrum, or I got depression, or I got anxiety, or I got narcissism or social phobia, whatever I think I have. But the truth is those conditions are all made up. Every one of them is all made up, and they're made up.
Wow.
Of course they are. Of course they are, man. They didn't exist for thousands of years. And now all of a sudden they're made up. And why are they made up? So we can give you medicine and actually give you that condition. So that's not anything new. I'm not really saying anything that's that shocking. Of course they're made up. It's not like they existed even 100 years ago. They didn't.
Well,
so
I have to say, Doc, if you don't mind, Dr. Moss, the reason why I say shocking, I think we've grown in our society so comfortable with it almost seems a term traditional would be a word that can be used with bipolar diagnoses.
Stupid diagnosis.
Yeah, and I what is that stupid diagnosis? But my point was, I think that we've grown so comfortable with those being commonplace as far as diagnoses that is shocking to hear they don't have to be necessarily those diagnoses. And I think that's why
not at all. You have a diagnosis, okay? You do. Only one. I can tell because I'm a doctor. You know what your diagnosis is?
What's that?
Your diagnosis is Seth Garou Baxter. Period. That's it.
So what happens to people? When, let's go in this route. So when a person is feeling something's not right with them.
Yeah.
And let's start from that point. So the person is feeling not right.
Okay.
Start from that as a psychiatrist. Let's see, what should they be thinking? If they're feeling not right, why are they feeling not right?
Feeling not right is part of the human condition. That's what they first should be thinking, that maybe there's nothing wrong with them at all, even if they're feeling lousy. Feeling lousy does not mean there's something wrong with you. We don't blame a log for burning in the fire, right? It's not a log's fault for burning in a fire. We're living in a fire. It's pretty uncomfortable to be alive these days. It's been pretty uncomfortable to be alive since the beginning of time, and it's uncomfortable to be alive these days. So when we're feeling lousy, don't throw in the towel that think there's something wrong with you. Maybe there's nothing wrong with you. Maybe this is just a central part of the human condition. But here's the other point. If you go and get professional help, in most cases, you will get worse. And you will get worse because the machine itself is not interested in curing you. The machine itself is interested in smothering whatever your symptom is, but having you dependent on your clinician, or in more cases than not, at least in psychiatric world, truly dependent on your medications, which not only give you some early relief, but then perpetuate, increase, induce, or often cause the symptoms they're marketed to treat. So in that world, what we can see is, if I really want to get help because I'm not feeling well, talk to anybody. You don't need a license. You don't need an education to be somebody that can help somebody who's not feeling well. When we communicate with another person, when we connect with another person, when we resonate, when we are harmonic with another person, that's where true healing takes place. I'm quite sure you've had this experience, maybe with a lover or maybe with a close friend, where you just all of a sudden get that you understand them and they understand you. It's a remarkable experience that far exceeds anything that conventional psychiatry has ever designed. So if you feel like something's wrong with you, go help somebody. That's the best thing to do. If you feel like there's something wrong with you, go help somebody. Go help somebody do anything.
So, Doc, doesn't this somewhat bring jeopardy to the field of psychiatry? Because if there's significance in the case that you're making that maybe there's nothing wrong with you, doesn't that bring a jeopardy to the field of psychiatry? Because maybe it is just that some people don't need a doctor, they need to communicate, because I want to come back to that as well. So how do we deal with that? So the field of psychiatry seems to have been a very valid source of support for societal measures of saying where they're getting treated, they're seeing therapists. And then I'd like to even add in this, years ago, I remember going to the Church of Scientology and seeing their materials, and the materials were saying psychiatry is not necessarily, and that was a big thing, but that was over 20 some odd years ago. Yeah. And I'm not building a relationship between you two, but I'm very, it always stood out in my head that some of the points they were making was similar to what you're saying that says, hey, sometimes it's just not that you need these medicines, and you should really examine that.
You never need the medicines.
So go into that. Elaborate further on that.
You never need medicines. You don't have a shortage of medicines in your body. You don't need medicine. There's never, now once you've been on medicine for a while, then you sort of need it to prevent the discomfort of coming off. People are so much more afraid of coming off medicine than they are of starting medicine. Isn't that weird?
It is.
People are so much more afraid of coming off medicine than they are of starting. They're totally ready. If a doctor gives them a script, they're to the pharmacy that afternoon and they're eating it that night, and that's the way that goes. But when it comes time to come off medicine, the system, the media, the whole
industrial complex somewhat.
Yeah, the whole complex has it be that you should be afraid of coming off a medicine. But who do you think taught you that? That's the media. That's multimedia. That's targeting advertising. That's the marketing. And when you really think about it, if it's more frightening to come off than it is to start, that is an inherent problem. Now, here's the other thing. It doesn't look to me like the world is getting any mentally healthier. Are you seeing that?
I am. I think, and Doc, I got to tell you, I feel really. I want to tell you in short. I feel we're all kind of seeing that. I think we're becoming more aware. The world is not getting mentally healthier, and it's becoming more accepted that everyone has a diagnosis of some sort. That's what I've.
Everyone does have the diagnosis. One. You probably know what my doctor's diagnosis is.
Now I do.
That's right. We all have a diagnosis. We all live in life.
And so what happens, because now people have become so, I see it, and I find it very much that I'm in contact more, not only through the podcast, but with people I worked with, and being in the field of psychobehavioral analysis with autistic individuals, more people seem to be becoming aware that maybe we weren't as sick as we thought, but maybe we were. And they've also gotten so used to that medicine and seeing a therapist is a part of what is getting better. And as you mentioned, in taking medicine, I feel better than I've ever felt now. They're so used to medicine being a part of that. So now with the diagnosis, just starting from this place that we are just this human being. I'm just Seth Guru Baxter, and you're just Dr. Fred. How do we begin this process to get people to re-examine that maybe it's not those things? You didn't need medicine. How do we get them to start seeing that?
It's just about having powerful conversations. So the people who initially say something like, I'm feeling better than I ever did, that generally what that is a myopic view of looking at things. So there's no medicine that's geared towards depression, for instance, not at all. It's geared toward emotions. So we wipe out all your emotions, including depression. And if all you're looking for is whether or not depression is there, you're going to see that it has reduced. But you're not even going to know what else you're missing, because we don't know when we're missing things. When we go blind, or when we have hard of hearing, or whatever we have, we don't even know what we're not hearing anymore. We don't know what we're not seeing anymore. And that's the same with the psychiatric medicine. It washes out maybe the depression, or it doesn't really. It actually increases the depression, and so does the anxiety meds, and so do the psychosis meds, and they increase the symptoms they're marketed to treat. They reliably increase the symptoms they're marketed to treat. That's how they got chosen for the package to be the treatment for that condition, is because you can be sure once you start those medicines, things will will ricochet back and forth, and you will need to stay on them for as long as you can, because if you start to come off of them, then you have to deal with the spike of the symptoms they're marketed to treat. In other words, let's say you weren't depressed, but I started you on an antidepressant. Now, let's say I didn't start you on anything. I wrote you a prescription and you chose to go to the pharmacy, and it's not my fault that you took medicine that I wrote to give you. Let's face that. It's not at all the doctor's fault. It's that you think you need it, and you went to the pharmacy, picked it up, and started eating it for like every day for 3 months. If you came off the medicine, then you would likely have a round of depression worse than you'd ever had before, because the medicines are built to have a spike of the symptoms they're marketed to treat upon discontinuation. So when you start getting that's what the whole system is built on. Look, it has multi-billion dollars per day profit margin per day. Look, there's no industry in the history of the world that's legitimate with a multi-billion-dollar per day profit margin. You can't be legitimate and carry those numbers. So there's a lot of money involved, but it's not, look, I'm not mad at the pharmacy companies. I'm not mad at the industry. I'm not mad at psychiatry. I'm not mad at anyone. The whole point is this can be stopped, but it only gets stopped at one place, which is don't come in. Like literally, don't come in. Then you won't have to deal with the fact that once you're in, you're done. Once you're in, you're tumbling through it. Most people don't know, Seth, that if you that every single time you come to a psychiatrist, he or she must diagnose you. You don't ever walk out of a psychiatrist without a diagnosis, even if it's your first time and even if you don't think you have one.
I don't think most people know that. That's very interesting because it's actually news to me. I don't think people know that.
Yeah, I know. It's true. Most people don't know that. They think that, that it's okay to just walk into a site. If they're going to get paid for their services, they're going to give you a diagnosis and now you have it. And guess what else? It's not removable. You will never disappear that diagnosis. Now, if that's frightening enough for you, that's one thing. But here's the thing. You will have the diagnosis if you start taking the medicine that treats it. Because the medicine is meant to give you those kind of symptoms that they're marketed to treat. Now, we all have a periods where we feel depressed or where we feel anxious or we'll feel crazy or where we feel like we're misguided or hopeless or helpless or terrified or whatever. Those things that are very uncomfortable. So we all know what those experiences are. And these medicines, upon discontinuation, but often during the route, during the period of time where you're taking it, actually cause those symptoms on the backside. You think it's you. See, people think that the medicines, when they work, they reduce, and then you break through. But actually, it's the opposite. When you're feeling well, that's you breaking through. When you're not feeling well, that's the medicines doing their job to make sure that you stay on them forever and ever.
Oh, wow. I don't think people think about that either because I think the immediate presumption is I'm feeling better. I don't have this depression anymore. I'm feeling better.
I don't know too many people who actually take antidepressants and simply believe that their depression has gone away. What has gone away is their ability to feel. Therefore, their ability to feel depression has also gone away. But they don't broaden themselves to look at the whole experience. Their sex goes away. They're not as excited with their family. They're missing all sorts of the thrills and chills of what it means to be alive. And that's what antidepressants actually do. So this idea that the antidepressants are aimed at a certain line of thinking that causes depression and therefore it needs to be smothered is not the real truth. If you really want to not be depressed, connect with another person. That will take away depression.
You mentioned something along those lines, and I like to string this up, but before I do it, and is mentioning communication. I want you to go into that. But is this where some of your particular thoughts on this whole thing, the undoctor comes in? Is that how some of that came about?
Yeah, communication, connection, and conversation. When we actually harmonically resonate with another person, there is a beautiful thing that happens at that moment. And most people equate that to love, actually. That's how beautiful it is. I mean, when you really get that thing going on, that's love. And there is nothing more powerful than that. It's the reason we're here. And it's what we're really here to do. The undoctor is something that is an affectionate moniker that a friend of mine gave me about 5 or 6 years ago, and I've gladly took it on. He had heard me speak for a while. We were at a men's group retreat, and it was awesome. It was like a what's it called when you
Epiphany?
No, when you go out into the woods, singly like.
I did that.
A vision quest. It was a vision
I did that. I did that, Doc.
Yeah, it was a vision quest. And so he gave me the name. He said, I'm going to give you a name that's going to hold on for you. And it's like, he said, you're the undoctor. I was like, that's so cool. So what an undoctor does is an undoctor undiagnoses people, unmedicates people, and then undoctrinates people, meaning stop at the door. And before you come in here, think twice. And it's not the best place to go when you're feeling uncomfortable. And although we can smother it, at some level, we can smother your depression. The loss is so much greater than the win. And we can smother your depression without you having to put toxic chemicals into your body. Imagine that. Like I say, people don't even think twice about putting the chemicals in their body. And then when it comes time to come off, time to come off, they're terrified and they won't even do it. It's like, no, these might be helping. It's like most people know that the medicines are not really doing them their very best. And by the way, here's a disclaimer for your listenership. There are some people out there who think, like you said, who think, oh no, medicine saved my life and my therapist is the best thing ever. And I love my treatment plan and I wouldn't change any of that for the world. And what I say to them is like, by all means, man, more power to you. Please keep doing that. If you found anything in life that you wouldn't change for the world because it's so good, you need to keep doing it. This conversation is for the hundreds of millions of people who feel like they're misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, overdiagnosed, mistreated, undertreated, overtreated, mismedicated, undermedicated, overmedicated. This is for that group. And this group is way larger than the group that thinks that medicine is working for them and that their therapy wouldn't be trading for the whole world. Am I saying that good things don't happen when you get therapy? For sure, things can happen. Why? Because for a moment, you feel like you're connected. That's why it's the same thing. Your therapist is not going to be very good if you don't feel connected to them. The only thing we really need more than anything is human connection. We are born to be connected with each other. We are one. We are one. We are humanity. And Welcome to Humanity is what my brand is. And that's why it says The Undoctor and Welcome to Humanity on my name, because really that's an answer to all of the human experiences. People come in and see me, they say, I was really nervous last night. Welcome to humanity. I was deeply depressed this morning. Welcome to humanity. I had a great night at the ocean. Welcome to humanity. I had a terrible time with my mom. Welcome to humanity. All these things are part of that overall human condition. So I'm not saying that having those experiences, I'm not minimizing or diminishing the experiences of super pain, like super discomfort. They happen, like super unpleasantness. I get it. Even misery. I'm not minimizing that. And I'm not saying so people sometimes hear me say that it's not a thing. It is a thing. It's just not a disease. It is a thing. It just doesn't mean, it doesn't represent that there's something inherently wrong with you. That's all. Because when you start thinking there's something wrong with you, what do you do when something's wrong with you? Well, we've been taught what to do. We go to a doctor. That's what we do.
That's right.
What do you do? What do you do when something's wrong with you? You go to a doctor. Who do you think taught us that? Yeah. The industry taught us that. That isn't inherently true. You could go to a lot of places when you feel uncomfortable. If there's things to do, like if your batting swing isn't working well, like you're not getting enough doubles, you don't go to a doctor for that. You go to a friend or you go to a coach or you get to somebody who understands you. So this idea that you go to a doctor is the thing that I'm really questioning. Now, I don't think the threat of the medical field is really inherent in what you're saying, thinking about the question you asked a few minutes ago. Because another way to look at this is psychiatry needs to change. It needs to stay a field. But what does it really need to do? It needs to be packed with people who understand that all problems are a function of the human condition and don't represent any kind of illness. When we get to that, now psychiatry has shifted and it can stay on forever. No problem. As long as it takes that as its basis instead of making people sick and then giving them medicines that make them sicker.
So what is the form that psychiatry would take in your vision? What is the form it would take now?
Yeah,
is prescribed medicine totally out of the picture? And it does bring me up to this other question.
For me, it would generally be totally out of the picture. It would not be a first line treatment. Now, I still prescribe medicine for some people. The people I prescribe medicine for are the people who already came in on medicine and they're really hesitant not to keep taking it. Because if I don't prescribe it, then they're just going to quit and go next door and go get it from the next doctor. But I really help people see that I don't think there's anything wrong with them. And if you have the courage to see that life is filled with clumsiness, it's filled with guilt, it's filled with shame, it's filled with resentment, it's filled with regret, it's filled with fear, it's filled with depression, it's filled with anxiety, it's filled with helplessness, all those things and more, that's part of life. It's okay. It's okay. You don't need to go pretend to try to fix them. You don't need to, but you can definitely make yourself head yourself towards greater comfort without buying the notion that there's something inherently wrong with those unpleasant experiences. Yeah.
So it brings me, there's so many questions,
Sure.
but so a parent now has a young person, their kid, male or female. The gender, I think, can go into other realms, but the young person is saying, they're about 16. They're saying, I don't feel right. I feel like I need to get some help of some sort. They themselves say, get some help because they don't feel right.
It's okay to need help.
And so now, so that help. So the parents think immediately, well, let's do all the tests and so forth. So
No, that's not necessary.
What's the process? Give us, elaborate. What should be the next few steps?
When you're not feeling well, find somebody who you can talk to, or go help somebody else. That's the process. Okay. It's pretty much that simple.
Okay. And then does spirituality take place in this?
Absolutely.
Does it take a role?
Spirituality is a super part of this pace. I have a list of the Moss method, and spirituality is one of those. Very important piece. On the back end of the list is spirituality and service. So it's number 19 and 20. But yeah, meditation, gratitude, nutrition, hydration, being out in nature, creativity, even things like, drinking herbal tea or taking care of your pets or having your pets take care of you. There's so many things that we can do that actually help us be more upright and more calm and realize that we are not our experiences. We are not our feelings. We are not our emotions. We're not our sensations. We are having those. But yeah, you almost can't do this if you don't have a sense of a higher power and a higher purpose. If all you think is it's all about you and how you feel needs to be dealt with like it's the center of the earth, then you're going to be in some trouble here, because life is hard, dude. Life is hard. It's hard to be alive. Have you noticed? It's really freaking hard to be alive.
Yes, especially these days. I think we both can agree that I think a number of people, and I've been talking about this in particular, which was why I was so glad to have you on. A number of people are seeing and becoming aware that I'm more aware that life is just not easy, and they are having a real challenge to try and adapt to that. And I mentioned on my show quite a few times Alvin Toffler, who spoke of future shock. And that was somewhat the diagnosis. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah.
And I think that I'm noticing people are becoming aware of they're not feeling the greatest, but they're also glad that they're becoming aware that things are just, life is not great right now. There's almost this chain that's been broken of people saying, things are really not what I thought they were, which brings me to, of late, I've mentioned also in my program, I've been really glad the conversation has talked, more men, especially men of color, have been talking about mental health. And so I've been an advocate of that being a positive thing to happen, that men are talking more about mental health and what does it mean. But it's probably going to give me a little trouble, but I find the challenge that now that men are talking about mental health, there's this larger market of money to be made on men's mental health. And I have a concern about that being not the greatest thing, because then it becomes about money. But it was good to hear that men, and especially men of color, were talking about getting mentally healthy, mental health support groups. So, but even a larger part of this one, which is my strongest advocacy, supporting one another and creating groups where we as men can talk to each other about, hey, I'm having this challenge. So mental health in men has been a part of this thing. What's your thoughts on the increased awareness now on men and their mental health?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, on the one hand, it's a great launching pad. It's a great place. I'm actually glad to hear it. It seems great. And again, I am not questioning whether or not uncomfortable experiences are rampant in this present day and age. They are very uncomfortable. all I'm really doing is saying that does not mean there's something wrong with you that needs a doctor. What it means is,
Oh, I just got that. It just really clicked in.
yeah.
There's something wrong is the thing that it just automatically really clicked. So we as people, when we're seeking out the help, it's because we automatically are saying something is wrong with me. You're saying, no, it's not necessarily something wrong. It doesn't mean you might not need supportive systems in place to help you where you're feeling, but it's not necessarily something diagnosably wrong with you, the person.
That's exactly right. That's right. You don't need a diagnosis at all. You have your diagnosis. Each one of us has our diagnosis. We don't need to go to any special person to tell us what our diagnosis is. All we have to do is look at our driver's license or birth certificate, and that's our diagnosis. We have an
So part of the diagnosis is realizing that we're a person.
We're a person. And inside of the world of the human condition, there's some very heavily uncomfortable spaces. Really uncomfortable. And when we get that, we're like, yeah, what about that person or that person? Well, that person or that person have probably already been given diagnoses. And once you've been given a diagnosis of some sort, you take on that identity. And once you take on that identity and you start getting treatment, now your therapist or your doctor already sees you as having that diagnosis, and so do you. And now you take medicines, and that actually helps you to get the diagnosis that you thought you had in the first place. And now you're rolling with the diagnosis, And those people, well, the 20 things in the Moss method that I talked about before that I compiled are things that you can put into place to help you realign your life. So they include meditation, they include gratitude, they include nature, they include pets, they include nutrition, they include pampering, they include sleep hygiene, they include spirituality, they include, being of service or volunteering work. And they include creativity, etc. And when we start doing those things, it's actually very relieving inside of the world of human condition. These things can really separate ourselves and give us a source of joy and pleasure without the help of a doctor or medications. You see, doctor and medication have a way, both of those things. Once you get that diagnosis, it's actually pretty traumatic and pretty damaging. In most cases, most people don't even know what their diagnosis was when they left the doctor's office the first time. But the doctor gave them a diagnosis 100%, because that's the only way the doctor can get paid. You can't write no diagnosis on the insurance form.
So are we moving into an area where maybe more the focus should be is self-health, and that self-health is just acknowledging something doesn't have to be wrong for me to seek out support, and the support I can seek out are my community, my church group, my temple, getting into exercise, making sure I change my diet. Some of that is changing the conversation that something doesn't have to be wrong with you because you feel uncomfortable.
Exactly.
And it's the discomfort. We have to get comfortable. And it's so interesting because this year has been such a growth year. I was reading this thing and it really changed my perspective. It said, part of the reason we don't grow is because we get so used to feeling comfortable.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel uncomfortable.
Exactly.
In order to have growth, you have to begin to feel comfortable with feeling uncomfortable.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when we can do that, which is not simple, I felt pretty uncomfortable earlier this morning, and it was like, man, I hope my life doesn't stop or get worse than this, because I was pretty uncomfortable. And that's what happens when you're uncomfortable. You get afraid that this is going to stay. Like this is as good as it's going to get, or it might get worse, And then you get worried that there's something wrong with you. Here's the other thing. This is kind of a funny equation. Everybody thinks there's something wrong with them. So when you get that, you can see that one of the traits of being human is to think that there's something wrong with you. When you can get that, it normalizes the idea that you think there's something wrong with you, because every one of us thinks there's something wrong with us. Why? Because we're comparing our insides to everybody's outsides, We see them on Insta or on Facebook or walking the street or having a beautiful girlfriend or a big house or whatever they got. And we see them communicating and smiling and doing all this stuff that we can't find ourselves doing. And we start thinking, oh man, I'm defective. I'm deficient. I'm wrong. And then we got the trigger built in. The marketing of this industry is so fantastic that when you feel like there's something wrong with you, what do? You go to a doctor. You go to a doctor first. Yeah. You go to a doctor, and your doctor is only trained to listen for what's wrong with you. And you're not going to him to find out if there's something wrong with you. You're going to him to find out what's wrong with me. You've already determined that there's something wrong with you. And so he's only there to stamp the, stamp of approval and give you some alphabet soup diagnosis, and then give you a pre-stated, prefabricated treatment plan that actually creates the symptoms it's marketed to treat, along with giving you a sense of comfort for a moment. So for instance, like I said before, like with alcohol, let's just use alcohol as a comparison, but for first drink or two, you actually feel pretty good. It's actually pretty good. And then you have a little bit more, and now you don't feel so good. And now you have a little bit more, or you don't. And now you wake up in the morning like wishing you were dead. Well, medicines work in a very similar way, very similar. The idea is they give you a sort of a sense of relief early on, like, whew, at least I feel different than I felt before. And that must mean I'm better. But what it erases or what it smothers or what it takes out, we don't even get to see what we're no longer seeing or no longer feeling. We don't get to feel that. How can you know what you're no longer feeling? We don't have the capacity to figure out what we no longer feel because we're just not feeling it. That's all. And we think that's the new norm.
Oh, wow. So I'm curious. So in the beginning of psychiatry, the understanding I have was it was to assist people in feeling better for these conditions that we see that are not having them feel great. So where did it go wrong?
That's a good question. No one's ever really asked me that. I'm good with that one though. I like it. I think that, psychiatry went wrong when it became financial. Okay. Because if you look back at the early psychiatrists, you go back, you don't have to go back very far, but if even you look back at Sigmund, in the early 1900s, and then Jung and all the people that followed them, there's not really very many psychiatrists before Sigmund. And so there's some people, I suppose, but they weren't called psychiatrists. So where it went wrong was when it got, when it got financial, when it got monetized. And, at that point, now they have to justify their profession and they have to make money. And one of the ways to make money is make sure that your patients stay perpetual, that your patients become dependent on you and come back week after week after week after week after week forever. And then the same thing happened. It just got expanded upon. But if you look at the early days, if you look at Jung, for instance, you'll see that he was very interested in creating proper relationships with people and being deeply and honestly curious about people. Like that was where his excellence was. The idea that all that happens now is a therapist is taught to say the right thing, whether or not they believe it, which is really strange, like pretend. It's almost like pretend to care. It's like, if you can pretend to care and do a really good job at it, then your patients will love you and they'll come back to you week after week. But that's not really very effective when it comes down to looking at the raw truth of what it means to be human. Because the raw freaking truth of what it means to be human is it's hard. Dude, you understand what I'm saying? It's hard.
Yes.
It's hard.
Yes. It is. And I really get that. I think it really vulnerable with you, doctor, is that I feel of late this present place of being that and I know as part of me getting older also and being a father, it is the realization that it's hard. But I do have this continuation of, but you know what? For me, my spirituality helps me to say it's hard. And this is what's going to get me. Exactly. And this is what's going to get me through it. This is what's going to get me through it. And I think there is something to be said about that pull up by the bootstraps. I think, if anything, that has been one of the most epiphanous revelations, is to say, I get it. Life is hard. My son went through this, or my wife went through that, and that understanding. But I know, having gone through therapy myself, I did feel I had a good therapist. I still feel I'm no longer in therapy with him, but I felt he didn't prescribe medicine or anything. But I knew that part of that was this realization that the world we live in has forever changed, and it is freaking hard.
It's
And
hard.
so, yes, but something you said, two things that you said I want to come back to. One was, I have a strong support group of men that are in my life, like my brothers. They're not my brothers, but we have this thing.
Yeah.
And we are here for each other when marriage stuff happens, or when things with our kids happen. And that has been so instrumental to me.
For sure.
And then I even got to say, even more importantly to me, has been talking to God and developing a spiritual soul self that has really validated, yes, it's hard, but I'm getting through it. And I'm not thinking suicidal, and I don't have crazy thoughts of hurting people or anything. It's the understanding that things are hard, and I have a higher source that grounds me.
I love
now, and with that, Doc, you mentioned this thing that I think is a vital portion that some people miss. It is that communication. So I'd like you to elaborate on that part. And you said, go ahead and communicate with someone, or that this is a big part of that communication. And I'd like you to elaborate on that, because I don't know, and I haven't heard a doctor like yourself mention this before, how important that is for people to learn the elements of communication, how that's helpful and supportive, to not just to know things are hard, but to know that this is healthy as a part of therapeutic to communicate with people. So explain communication.
So communication is a requirement here, and there's a lot of ways to communicate. My first book, called Creative 8, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression, it really goes over this. But the idea is, there's lots of ways to communicate, but we have to communicate. There's no such thing as not communicating. So when you're sitting still and you're not talking to somebody, you're definitely communicating. And communication can happen through voice and hearing, like we're doing here, but it can be used with the performance arts or the visual arts as well. So art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, gardening, all those things are really cool. And they're really, they can really help you communicate. But the essence of all this is to connect with another person. And that's where really, honest to goodness, true healing actually take place. Yeah.
And I'm so glad you mentioned. Yes, it is. It's exactly what I meant. I was so glad that earlier on, even in our pre-record for this interview, you mentioned communication being a key portion of how people are able to get healed from that. And I'm so glad, because I think for me, again, I know in communicating, I have one of my favorite people, Val. I can communicate with her. My boys, Chris and Tim, and that has been a part of that. And then also, it is the activities. I'm involved in art and art shows. So that I wanted to have you explain that communication is not just a variety of those things, but it is connecting with another person. And that's part of what I feel is significantly missing nowadays, where people do have some of this isolationism. And I don't think COVID helped a great deal with that. And I'm curious, what are your views on how COVID impacted some of our ability to communicate and or feel good about ourselves? What's your thoughts
we're probably
on
going to
that?
have to
And please feel free to go into some of that, but do know this has been so great that I want to speak to you at least once a month, because there's several areas that you have such great information that we didn't get to share with our audience here in today. But I just like us to have an ongoing conversation. So if you don't mind.
I think that COVID, the impact on COVID is it really depends on where you were in the whole ride and what happened to and through and from you. And how you saw things. Different people saw different things happening or felt different things happening. The isolation that happened in COVID is what was the most extreme impact. The idea that we no longer could treat each other as if we were brothers, when in fact everybody was like a possible sick enemy. And so we had these 6 feet, and then we had these masks that we had to wear, and we couldn't congregate. And that was the major problem with the whole COVID thing from a psychiatric standpoint. So, and then people felt helpless and hopeless because they couldn't, and they no longer had access to the people that were really helping them be steady. And so that what I think is the biggest impact. So And then, there's a lot of people who whose family members or their own selves got hospitalized for the diagnosis, and this was also troubling. So yeah, I mean, that's
did
all.
It have a?
What's that?
Was it a huge? Did it have a huge? I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, massive impact.
While you're on that point, and I think it did. It had a massive impact on us as a nation. I think as a world, in some of where this psychiatry became a larger part of how people thought, okay, well, since COVID, I felt more isolated, I'm more depressed, and those sorts of things. And I think there's some conversation to be had on how much it influenced people's feelings about their own mental health. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it really and people became more discouraged about saying what they really thought about things because, anyways, there was a lot of muting going on and a lot of separation, a lot of isolation, and those things had massive impact on the collective mental health consciousness.
And so now the community, so to reestablish a connection to mental health and healing.
Seth, you go ahead. I know that we're going to be able to edit this out, but you should know I have to leave in about 4 minutes.
Yes, I was just going to say we're coming down to the time. That's what I said. I would like to have you back on again. Yeah. So I got to tell you this, Doc. We had our pre-conversation and we already connected, and I just had really just felt so compelled to have the information come out with you. I'd like to have an ongoing once a month kind of conversation with you that goes into some of the other elements of some of your expertise as well. Before going any further, though, the Moss method, where can people find that and get a hold of that?
Yeah, the Moss method is embedded inside of the welcometohumanity.net, and I can talk to people about that. The other place you can go is drfred360.com. That's where that's one of my I have 2 websites. It kind of directs to welcometohumanity.net. And then the Undr Reset. The Undr Reset's a lot of action in there, and the Moss method is utilized. It's just 20 things, and I'd be glad to share it with you and share the document with you and with other people as far as how we can stay steady in this crazy world.
And if you can send those over to me, we'll put those in the link of the description of this interview as well. I'd like people to be able to get it with our 388,000 listeners. And subscribers. I'd like them to be able to have that accessible. So we'll put a link in this interview as well when it's released.
Wonderful. I love that. Thank you for doing that.
Doc, I got to tell you, real quick, your thoughts on love, just as your closing remarks. How important is love into mental health? Everything,
man. There's nothing more. I don't know. There's nothing in the world more important, ultimately. I mean, that's all, it makes the world go round. All you need is love. That's just the way it is, man. I mean, and love, not so much as for your partner, but that's also cool, but not so much for your kids. That's also cool. Like, love is the whole thing. If you can get to a space where you get that this whole thing is happening for a reason, every single piece of it, including the highly miserable pieces, are happening for a reason, and you can actually love life anyways, dude, you got the cat by the tail at that point.
That it couldn't even be a better way to tie this up with the bow. And Doctor, I'm going to be sending you information for us to tie to schedule an appointment for next month as well.
Okay.
I just thank you, Makerspar audience and the Seth Guru audience. Thank you so much, Dr. Fred Moss, who is a podcast host and a psychiatrist, and one of my new favorite people just from this conversation. I can't share enough, and I'm looking forward to our partnership and what we can do to build on this structure.
I got some ideas for us, Seth. I got some good ideas for it.
I'm really glad, Doc, because I think it's really needed. I think your voice and your perspective is really needed right now, and particularly to some of the people that I work with and the young people and the other areas of my life that I'm interested in. I think your voice is really needed. So we thank you so much in helping us to create these 1 million leaders and be on the program today.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thanks for having me on. And thanks for your support. And thanks for your love. And I love you too. And thank you so much for putting me on the spotlight.
Oh, Doc, I love you too, and I just really appreciate it. As I've always said at the end of the program, the revolution that we want is the love-volution, a revolution of love. Let's go out there and continue to build upon and gather support for a revolution of love. Dr. Fred Moss, thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to speaking with you next month.
Thanks, Seth. Very cool. Bye for now.
Absolutely, buddy. Take good care. Bye-bye. Bye.